Hello my beautiful watchers. See, I told you I was still doing these, you just had to be patient. Just in case it's only first time watchers joining us, The Prisoner was a BBC TV show that launched in 1968 that, by design, only lasted one season but entranced the world with its new and unusual storylines and heavy use of clever subtext. It's one of those shows that if 5 people watch an episode, you'd more than likely end up with 5 radically different opinions of what just happened and what it means. The basic setup for the plot is a pseudo James Bond unexpectedly and mysteriously quits his spy job and, as a result, is taken prisoner by a mysterious organization of unknown origin who hold him in an isolated village while they try to break his mind with a series of insane experiments and a shit ton of medication. Everyone in said village, whether they're a prisoner, a guard, or part of the management, is known only by an assigned number. The spy is dubbed number 6 and he goes along with it because he doesn't want to give up his real name. There's, also a giant living latex balloon named Rover that kills people if they get out of line. Now supposedly this is a new and secret technology known only to the village, but in reality I'm given to understand the robot they were going to use for this role broke down in rehearsal, so they needed a stand-in on short notice. Also, the supposedly island village is actually a now famous town in Wales that you can visit if you feel so inclined. Okie dokie, now that everyone's caught up, let's take a look at the next 2 episodes. Starting with Dance of the Dead. The episode starts with, big surprise, number 6 being drugged off his tits so the village can do weird shit to him. Generic creepy mad scientist man hooks 6 up some sort of electrodes and tries to wheedle information out of him using a catatonic old friend of his from the Spy game, but 6 is his usual uncooperative self and the attempt is quickly shut down by the new and weirdly sexy number 2. Like most of the number 2s before her, part of her job seems to be to remind everyone on a regular basis that number 6 is the baddest of all the asses in town.
Number 6 was about to talk.
Don't you believe it? He'd have died first. You can't force it out of this man. He's not like the others.
The next morning, number 6 wakes up with what is now presumably his normal drug hangover. To his slight annoyance and confusion, his regular maid appears to have been replaced by an Elizabethan cosplayer. This is partially explained when he receives an invitation to the village carnival. One of my fondest memories of this show is the witty back and forth 6 has with all the number 2s, and this one in particular has some really great exchanges.
You'll come.
I have a choice.
You do as you want.
As long as it's what you want.
I'm sad, number 6. I thought you were beginning to...
Give in.
Be happy. Everything you want is here.
Everything's elsewhere.
What were you looking at?
A light?
A star.
A boat?
An insect.
A plane?
A flying fish.
Somebody who belongs to my world.
This is your world. I am your world.
A miserable-looking lady catches number 6's eye, and number 2's attempt to dissuade him from talking to her inclines him to do so on general principle. She responds in a way somewhat more verbose, but not dissimilar to the results of my attempts to approach women.
I must go.
In a somewhat ungentlemanly move, number 6 doesn't take no for an answer, and Rover has to step in to cockblock him. She's quickly revealed to be a village crony. I just want to point out that this has proven to be the case with almost every woman 6 has spoken to since the beginning. I'm starting to wonder if maybe the lead writer was working through some stuff. Oh, hello, Patrick. Good morning, Anthony. How are things? Not so good, actually. My bitch of an ex-wife has just taken me to the cleaners. She's got the children, the car, the house, everything! I hate her! I hate her so much! Anyway, here's the script for today's episode. Never trust a woman, not even the 4-legged variety. What? That night, number 6 has one of his periodic tantrums about the village's attempts to control his every action, including his bedtime, and decides to cheese it out of the village again. This doesn't strike me as a genuine escape attempt, more just a general act of defiance. He legs it down the beach with Rover keeping pace with him as a constant reminder of which giant floating testicle runs shit in this neighborhood until number 6 collapses with exhaustion. The next morning, 6 discovers he has an unexpected guest in the form of a body that's washed up on the beach who happens to have some sort of radio on him. Not a man to let anything go to waste, he hides the corpse in a cave for later. When he finally returns home, he finds out that his costume for the carnival is to be his own tuxedo. Subtext goes through the roof here as he chooses to ignore the village's clear hint that he is no longer who he was and can only pretend to be in costume from now on, and is just happy that he has his suit back. 6 tries out his new toy, but the village is already onto him. It's suggested that nothing useful was gained from the few seconds of commercial radio he picked up, but 6 has a smug look on his face that suggests otherwise. After another repartee with number 2 and a slightly bitter exchange with his observer, number 6 surreptitiously half-inches a rubber ring and uses it to make a message in a bottle. Except in this case, the role of bottle is played by a bloated dead guy. After that spot of macabre MacGyvering, 6 comes face to face with a drugged-up spy from the start, a low-level colleague of his named Dutton. Poor Dutton is painfully aware that the value he has to the village as a sort of info is not anything close to 6's, so they're probably not going to show any of the same restraint on the methods they used to extract it. He reveals to 6 that in about 72 hours they plan to figuratively cut the information out of him with a scalpel. I'm assuming they then skip over the part where 6 tries to brainstorm ways of saving Dutton and their conversation doesn't end with with Six simply adopting a, well, sucks to be you, old boy, attitude that the sudden cut suggests. The next day, number 2 brings Six to the town hall for the supposed carnival, though, as usual, the fascist nature of his surroundings stop him from fully enjoying himself. He slips out to snoop around and intercepts a termination order for Dutton. To his disappointment, he then discovers that his departed friend has been intercepted on his way out to sea and has been literally filed away by the village.
We'll amend him slightly. It's you who's died in an accident at sea.
So to the outside world,
Which you only dream about.
I'll be dead.
A small confirmation of a known fact.
The village then puts number 6 on trial for briefly owning a radio, and number 2, return Captain Kirk's chair at once, that's not okay. The trial is clearly fixed and just an attempt to unnerve Six. Despite this, Six tries to use it to his advantage and calls Dutton as a character witness, only to discover that unfortunately they seem to have lobotomized him ahead of schedule. The trial results in a death sentence, and apparently the village is just dying to try out this whole lynch mob thing, and they chase Six through the building. He manages to lose them in a secret tunnel that leads him to a fancy room with some sort of old-fashioned printer in it, which he apparently takes great offense to and disembowels right before number 2 shows up. Despite not having really achieved anything in regards to Six, aside from briefly forcing him to leg it from an angry mob, she appears to consider this a victory for her, and the episode ends with her laughing maniacally while the destroyed printer mysteriously starts working again. The apparent pointlessness of this episode could be explained by the now notorious episode jumbling that occurred to this show. I strongly suspect this was originally intended as the 3rd or maybe even 2nd episode, as Six makes at least 2 references to being newly arrived in the village. Number 6 and the village are still testing each other, firing warning shots over each other's bows. Six is still probing the village's defenses, and number 2 seems content to simply give Six a taste of the horror that might be in store for him if he doesn't change his attitude, and gives off the impression of having all the time in the world to break him. This is in direct contrast to the supposedly preceding number 2s who came across as being on the cusp of their deadlines and the end of their ropes. Let's see, what else? There's a recurring theme of number 6 befriending a cat who turns out to belong to number 2 in the end, a stark reminder that everyone is potentially out to get him in this place.
Never trust a woman, even the 4-legged variety.
There's also a subplot about number 6's observer getting too involved with her subjects and becoming emotionally compromised. She seems upset that one of her other subjects has been bumped off, and right at the last minute objects to number 6's death sentence. The problem is, this doesn't really contribute to the plot in any way. At the end, number 2 simply dismisses her from her position. It can't even be seen as a small victory for number 6, as he played no part in her character arc, or a chink in the village's armor, as her turnaround didn't really hurt them in any way, shape or form. All in all, I'd have to say that storyline wise this is kind of a throwaway episode, but fortunately it's redeemed by the always amusing dry dialogue between 6 and 2. Worth watching just for that, and even if that's not your thing, you still get all the oddly hypnotic bizarrity that made The Prisoner so popular in its day.
You'll never win.
Then how very uncomfortable for you, old chap.
Moving straight on into Checkmate. This episode starts with Rover strutting his funky stuff down the main street.
They see me rolling, they hating.
Six happens to be chilling on a balcony and sees what appears to be the only other guy in the village who doesn't give a fuck. Simply out of curiosity, he follows him and gets roped into a game of living chess. He makes small talk with the queen for a while, then suddenly the guy playing the rook decides to skip to the end and walk straight across the board to declare check. Apparently that's a huge no-no and he's carted off for treatment. This guy is referred to as the rook for the rest of the episode. The woman who is filling the role of the queen seems to take a shine to number 6, but it seems the writer's finally gotten counselling and he gives her the brush off. The next day, number 2 invites number 6 to join him while he goes to the hospital to check on the treatment of the miscellaneous rook. Said treatment is unpleasant. Number 6 apparently decides that if you can't trust a man who recently went through electric shock reconditioning, who can you trust? And in an amusing switch around becomes the follower to the followed. When he eventually catches up to him, the poor bastard shits his pants because he assumes from 6's commanding demeanour that he must be a village guard. This perfectly demonstrates the point 6 was hoping to make. He believes he has developed the perfect test for telling which of their fellow residents are genuine prisoners and which are guards. Because the management is so good at breaking people's will, if you catch someone off guard with a command, they would automatically assume a subservient demeanour. If you did the same thing with an impersonator, they would become defensive instead. Using this test, they can form a team and use their combined skills to escape together. The Rook is an excellent start as he turns out to be a genius engineer inventor. They also successfully recruit a handyman, the village shopkeeper, and Captain Fuck You, Rover. Suspicious of number 6's behaviour but unable to prove anything, the village hypnotizes the queen into believing she's hopelessly in love with him. They then equip her with an electronic heart monitor in the form of a locket that will inform them wirelessly if she becomes panicked, say by discovering that number 6 is escaping. They essentially turn the poor woman into a living alarm system. Meanwhile, number 6 and the Rook have been grabbing things from around the village and start building themselves a radio transmitter. 6 isn't massively impressed with the Queen's renewed attention. If he really was James Bond, he'd be done and having a cigarette by now, suspected indoctrination be damned.
What's the matter?
Nothing's the matter.
Stop crying.
He actually catches on to the reaction transmitter locket scheme remarkably quickly and talks her into relinquishing it. 6 tries out the new radio and discovers there might be a boat passing by soon. The Rook goes out to draw them in with a distress signal, and 6 rallies the troops to disable the village's outlying watchtowers and defenses. You see that the current number 2 is a karate black belt. I immediately assumed this was building up to a kick-ass showdown between him and 6, but when they come face to face in the very next scene, he just meekly lets them take him captive. Unfortunately, things stop going to plan at this point as the Rook disappears. 6 tries to salvage things by reaching the boat and then talking them into coming back for them later, but it turns out the boat was a village vessel the whole time, and even worse, the Rook had misapplied 6's own test and mistakenly assumed that 6 was a village plant, setting him up to take a fall, and bailed on the plan. Number 6 makes one last desperate attempt at freedom by beating the shit out of the crew and trying to steal the boat, but the controls are locked, and as Rover pushes him back to shore, number 2's midget butler symbolically places an errant chess piece back in its proper place. Holy shitballs, have I not mentioned the midget butler until now? He's like one of the coolest characters in the whole show and the only other actor aside from Magooan to be in the entire series all the way through. I mean, he's usually just in the background chilling or being weird or, I don't know, serving tea and breakfast, but ultimately he's a really important character. Shit, I've been seriously letting you guys down by not talking about him. I beg your forgiveness. Anyways, this episode is uniquely good in that 6's failed escape attempt didn't turn out to be set up by the village the whole time. If things had gone according to plan, he might have had a decent chance of making it to glorious freedom. It was very clever of them to throw something like this in there, as it means you still feel invested in his struggles and aren't lulled into assuming that all future attempts will be a foregone conclusion. If by chance you haven't partook of this show yet and my meandering here has inspired you to do so, might I recommend discarding the release order and instead viewing them in this sequence. If trust issues stop you from doing this, it's not the end of the world. As long as you watch Arrival first, you can pretty much move on to any episode you want after that, except for the last 2. You stay away from those, beautiful watchers. I'm serious. See you next time.